Welcome to our latest Book Reporter Talks to interview, where our guest today is Mary Kay Andrews, whose book had me smiling from the minute I started reading it because it's called Hello Summer. And I think everyone like me is ready to say just hello to summer because we feel like it's just going to be a new season, a new awakening. You know, every summer I go out to the pool, sit by, and escape with her books. And that's what these books are right now. And this is what we all need is escape. So I've been a long-time reader of yours here at Book Reporter, predates, like in a long time of reading this. So excited to be talking today. Welcome, Mary Kay.
Thank you, Carol. Great to be with you.
Oh, so much fun. So much fun. Wish we were in person.
I
We
know.
usually get to do that.
I know.
So tell us a little bit about Hello Summer. Just set it up for our readers.
Hello, Summer. The protagonist's name is Conley Hawkins. She is a big city investigative newspaper reporter, and at the beginning of the book, you meet her at her going away party in the newsroom at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. She's quit her job. She's got a new job waiting in the wings at a big-time digital-only outfit in Washington, and she's broken up with her boyfriend and given up her apartment. And at the going away party, before she can cut the going away cake, which is a tradition, she gets a text from her older sister. And there's a link to a Wall Street Journal story talking about the fact that the paper she was going to work for has just announced that they're ceasing publication. So
Great moment at the going away party. Hold that champagne, put it down. There we go.
yeah, she doesn't even get to cut the cake.
And so then she's got to go back to her hometown, which she kind of ran away from years ago. And we're going to find out many, many reasons why that you unfold is going on. What drew you to make her a journalist? I think this is the first time you've had a character as a journalist.
Well, that's not exactly right. I wrote 2 books years ago under my real name when I was writing mysteries, and they weren't set at a newspaper, but the protagonist was a retired AP reporter in his 70s. But this is the first time I've really written a newsroom story, and it has to do with my background. I was a newspaper reporter for 14 years. My last going away party was in the newsroom at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. So I had been wanting to write a story set at a newspaper for years, and my editor kept saying, no, newspapers are dying, nobody cares. And I kept objecting and saying, well, that's where the conflict is. You don't have, if you have someone working in a struggling environment, struggling to stay alive, there's great conflict there. But this year, my editor said, you've never written a story about a newsroom. Why don't you write one?
I can do that.
I said, okay, yeah, I could do that. So yeah, it's set at and the Silver Bay Beacon, the family weekly that her family owns, is struggling to stay afloat like most newspapers in the country. They're, faced with dwindling circulation and dwindling advertising, which is what newspapers make money at. They don't make money off circulation and subscriptions. The money comes from advertising, and when you don't have advertising, then you're sinking.
Yeah, and I felt it was a really good commentary on what's going on in the news media today, which the average person doesn't really think about. They think about, I'm not getting the paper, but they're not thinking about what not getting that paper is going to mean in the bigger scheme. I started out my career at Condé Nast. I was there for 17 years. And it's the same thing that I'm thinking, because I don't think we saw the cataclysmic shift and the change that this was going to be at any point. Am I right that you were sort of driving that little bit of commentary here as well? Because that's what I'm seeing is you're sort of explaining to people, this is what's happening, folks.
Yeah, the entire media universe is shifting. Magazines are going out of business. Formerly flourishing magazines are going out of business. They're consolidating. Radio, television, same thing. Radio stations really have downshifted because you've got satellite radio. So yeah, it's across the media landscape. And I wanted to write about what it means to a community and how local journalism matters, and it matters in ways none of us really understand until we don't have it anymore.
Right. Until you're just logging onto your local patch or your local list online, where the writing is just not the same. What do you think a community newspaper, I mean, hello, Summer, we're going to get into what the meaning of that is as well. A community newspaper means to a small town. Like, what is it? Is it the voice of the town? Is it, what's
It's
special about it?
it's the voice, and a good one is the conscience
Hmm.
of the communities, and the people who are working in that, in a good journalism sense, are asking the hard questions. So yes, you can go on a government website and find and see the latest press release, and but who's going to put that in context? Who's going to ask questions? Who's going to ask, well, how did that happen, or is that really true? Who's going to fact check it? And that's what happens with good journalism. They ask the hard questions, and they dig, and they go beneath the surface of things. And in the book, Conley gets real unpopular real quick because she's asking hard questions, and she's asking questions that people don't want to answered, or they don't want to know.
Right. And what I loved is you think of a big city paper doing that, but she, because she's honed her, earned her stripes at a big paper, is really just going to go for it. She's like, oh, so we're unpopular. Oh, that's a good thing. Oh, if they're calling, if they want to cancel, that's fine. Somebody else wants to read it. And I love that attitude because I think too many people take the straight and narrow path of like, this is just easy. But in a small town paper, I feel like she was still trying to be the conscience of the town.
Yeah, and it doesn't win her any points with her sister, who is the publisher, because as her sister says, I'm the one who's going to be here when you're gone.
Hmm.
Conley goes home, and she's already putting out resumes looking for a new job. She has no intention of staying in Silver Bay, where nothing really ever happens. She thinks that should be on the paper's masthead. Nothing happens here. Um, and so, she doesn't have to live with the consequence. She doesn't have to live with the consequences of asking those questions. But that's what happens to journalists. You have to be objective. You have to ask questions, and then you have to live with the repercussions of that. You have to. I did research for this book, and I went to a really good weekly paper not far from Atlanta, and this couple have owned it for about 20 some years. And I said, what happens when you have to write an unpopular story? And the wife said, well, you'll be sitting in church and someone will move pews,
Wow. Wow.
or
And
they'll call you up, or they stop you on the street and chew you out.
yeah, and she said there was this line in there. They have your home phone number, which they don't have at a big city paper. They know where to find you. They know where to track you down. And I thought that was so interesting because you're not hidden at all. It's like you're straight out there with what you're doing. And the other thing I found about a small town paper too is if you're chasing the story, what could it mean for them? Because all of a sudden their circulation starts getting better. I mean, I love when they go back to press, which is like, what should we do? Because they're realizing that people are hungry for a really good story.
Yeah, and it might be unpopular with some people, and it might be controversial. But the old axiom in journalism is, if it bleeds, it leads.
Hmm. Exactly. Exactly. So speaking of journalism, Hello Summers actually, and I love this, the name of the column that this woman Rowena writes inside. And tell us a little bit about this paper, this column, because she's clearly a character, and it's about her and her work because she really is. She's one of the most fun characters I've read.
Well, she's inspired by a real life character. When I went to work at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in 1983, I sat next to the paper's septuagenarian society columnist, and her name was Yolanda Gwynn. And Yolanda was a superannuated sorority girl. She came with the with the poofy white hairdo, and she had a cane, and she would have bows on her cane according to what she was wearing that day. And she'd actually covered the Atlanta premiere of Gone with the Wind. That's how old
Wow.
and how long Yolande had been around. But Yolande couldn't spell, and sometimes the facts got in the way. So she was, as soon as I met her, she did have a little purse puppy, who I think her dog's name was, I think, Fluffy, and Rowena's dog I think is Tuffy.
Hmm.
But she she was quite a character. And so I think I knew, from the time I met her, I thought someday Yolande will show up in a book. And so Hello Summer is when she shows up.
Well, I love the way that sappy death euphemisms for the obits really had me laughing. Laid to rest, went to his eternal home, blah, blah, blah. I take it you had fun writing those. Did you have fun doing some of this stuff?
I did. I did. One of my first job out of college was at the Savannah Morning News, and I worked the 2 to 11 graveyard shift. But on Saturday afternoons when you were working, you had to take obituaries over the phone from the funeral homes, and there were some great ones. I've always loved obituaries. My father loved obituaries. He was Irish, and he used to call them the Irish sports page. Um, and Carol, of course, gets this, but
Yes, I totally got it.
even though she's Italian, she's married to an Irishman.
Totally, yeah, totally get what you're talking about.
So
No,
anyway,
but
the obituaries were a lot of fun to write about.
yeah, you can tell because it's just like more super, like more a story, like build up more of what's going on. So beach settings are what your readers have come to expect. And you've taken us all over Georgia, North Carolina. The last couple have been in Florida. So what's drawn you back to your home state? What's got you moving back towards Florida?
I never know what the pull will be. I really thought I might set this book on the Alabama Gulf Coast, but when I went there, it wasn't the right setting. I think in my mind, sometimes the story starts out and the characters. I start out with story and characters. Sometimes I start out with the setting. I was looking for the right setting for this book, um, and I found it. And I made up. It's a fictional town. Silver Bay is a fictional town on the Florida Panhandle, kind of near. It's not as chic as Seaside, and it's not as touristy as Panama City. Um, it's still it's sort of off the beaten path, and I like that because it's a small town and they're struggling in lots of ways that other small towns across America are struggling. So
Mm.
I don't know, maybe it's just the pull of the tide.
It was totally, when you were there, you felt the place. I totally felt the place. I felt I could see it, but I wasn't thinking of Florida, that coast looking like that at all. Of course, you've got an old beach house that's in front and center, main character. What do you love about these old houses? Because it's just, you give them so much life. They're the ones that you drive by and say, oh, I wonder who's renting that. But you really give them this huge amount of character.
Well, it's a love affair with old houses. I love antiques, I love preservation. We have an old wooden beach house on Tybee Island outside of Savannah. Um, Years ago, when I was writing Summer Rental, that book was set at a beat up 100-year-old wood frame house on the Outer Banks in Nags Head. And to research that book, I actually went to some of those houses and interviewed families who had owned them for generations. And I don't know, it's the smell of the old wood and the salt and the secrets that are, lurking behind those walls. I A new shiny new house just doesn't have any pull for me at all. I like the idea that a house has character and that stories have happened there and are going to keep happening.
Yeah. I know that you recently renovated, what you put a new garage on and you built a place above the, first of all, the house is called Squirrel's Nest, which I absolutely love. And I want to know the
Squirrel Hollow.
Squirrel Hollow. Look at somebody told me the Squirrel Nest. Okay. Squirrel Hollow.
The carriage house is the squirrel's nest.
Oh, must get my squirrels correct. I think I've got squirrels running around my attic. They're driving me crazy. But you recently did that. Do you love like your writing, and then you love the other part of just going and getting physical, literally about building a place and building a place out. So is that correct about the two different parts of MKA?
Yeah, I think it scratches my creative itch. You spend long hours at a desk, beating your head against the desk a lot of the time, and then I love to get out and get my hands dirty and create something. I'm not musical. I don't paint. I don't play tennis or golf. I play house, and so creating a new little house from scratch. It's only 500 square feet, and furnishing it with all my estate sale finds and you know my new my new my new thing is Facebook Marketplace. um,
For buying things.
for buying things. Yeah. So it's just a create. It's like painting, but the house itself is the palette.
Yeah, exactly. You and I have talked about too, when you get stuck, you'll go out and do a project like that. You don't just sit at the computer and just keep trying to make it happen. And we've talked about that because I said, I'll go knit or I'll go rearrange yarn. I'll go do something like that because I think you have to switch your brain. And we've talked about it. Everybody just says, just keep sitting there. But I think we've agreed that if you just sit there, you sometimes make zero progress and you're outside fluffing. And then you're like, I think I know where I'm going to go.
Yeah, I mean, we are currently, my husband has taken up furniture making, and he's been doing more of it since we've been in self-isolation. So he's making a dining room table for our son. So I went out and sanded down the wood for the tabletop and the base, and then painted it and waxed it. And while I'm doing that, the repetition, the
Mhm.
mindless repetition of doing something like that sort of, frees up your subconscious. And then all of a sudden the idea comes to you, oh, what about that? That could happen. That could happen. And so, I don't always work on a house project. Sometimes I'll take a walk. The shower, I get a lot of great ideas in the shower because
Yeah.
I think it's like an isolation booth.
Can write in the steam on the wall, here, just don't decondensation, don't
I
look
come right
away.
in my bathrobe and scrawl something on a notepad.
My husband is actually doing a lot of furniture building. He built all our patio furniture and he's building a light right now for the kitchen. And I keep saying to him, I am going to do an interview, not with the saw, no sawing for the next hour. And I just heard him sneaking in and I'm like, really, he really thinks I don't hear the saw downstairs. I don't know what's going on. But it's fun because he'll imagine something and then bring it to me. And I would never have decided that. And sometimes I say, well, I have to have design approval. I have to have design approval about what's going on. But usually his vision is much bigger than mine.
Yeah, I am design and sourcing, and he is engineering and implementation.
Right.
And as long as we have our roles straight,
Mm-hmm.
things are okay.
Well, the other day he did come in and tell me he was going to paint it this color gold. And I was like, no, I don't really like that color. He goes, it's the trim in the whole kitchen. I said, well, while we're at it, I'd like to change that. And he just walked out of the room like, wait, that was a much bigger question than I planned to pose, But I think we have, I've got that cherry pepper, a cherry red in the kitchen. And I think we've discussed that color more than once as a really good color to have.
Yeah.
So one thing though, at the beach, if you see homes being torn down and McMansions going in, don't you feel there should be some kind of a design review board so these towns still stay looking the same?
I do, but I don't get a vote.
All right.
It is sad. I go to the Outer Banks on book tour every year, but this year
Mm-hmm.
there's no book tour this year except here. And I have over the past 5 years seen a stretch of a place that you love as well as I do, Duck.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there is a stretch of the beach on Duck, and just in the space of 3 years, um, these ginormous vacation rental villas have popped up. And the bookstore owner there, who's become a friend, and she's your friend too, Jamie,
Mm-hmm.
said, those houses sleep 22, 28, 30 people, 15 cars, and they line the beach in that part of Duck now. And I don't know, it's sad to me, but I understand people have property rights and have a right to make a living. I just wish they could make it on a smaller scale.
Either that or have it look like the rest of the town. The outside of these homes is always these big windows. It looks super modern. I think that the Outer Banks changed a lot after Hurricane Sandy, because when the beaches were destroyed up here, a lot of people who had never gone to the Outer Banks, and we'd been going for a very long time at that point, they were cheaper than renting in New Jersey. A lot of the homes in New Jersey were gone. And I feel like the place took on a different tone because there were people from a different part of the country. It wasn't just they were coming out from North Carolina or from here or there. And I just think that it started to change. It started to change in the stores. And it was just interesting that something like that was a hurricane, could have that much of an impact on another part of the country in a completely different way than what you'd think.
Yeah, yeah,
And
it's,
so,
it's true.
So now let's talk character names. And one of the things I noticed is Conley's real name is Sarah, but you couldn't really call her Conley because when she was little, that wouldn't have been the kind of name that anybody would have named their child. So you're very much, thinking about that. Are you always scrolling names like that and saying, how can I make it work?
Yeah, I'm always looking. I'm always looking for names. I love the obituaries for names. I've actually been in old graveyards looking at gravestones for names. So I always knew her name was Conley, and I knew she would have one of those very Southern double names. So Sarah Conley. And in the South, lots of times people use a maiden name, a relative's name, um, and double names are a big thing. I had a college roommate whose name was Lao Po, and no one ever called her Lao. It was always Lao Po.
Two names strung together, always.
And everybody in this small circle of girls in our dorm hall it was double names. Nancy Kwan, Kathy Hogan.
It's always, everything's got to go together. It's always like, let's define you. But there are also nicknames in small towns like Skelly. Like I really love that because there's this, I find in small towns, there's this like little double life with their nicknames because you're hearing the name and you're like, why are you called that? Like, where did that come from and what's going on? So it sort of brings you into the town as well, just by what you're doing and playing around with the names.
Yeah, I knew a guy all through elementary school, and he was very tall and very skinny, and his last name was Bennett. And he was Boney Bennett. And I can remember in high school hearing his first name. I'm like, well, Scott, I know. No, that's Boney Bennett. And so that was sort of the inspiration for Skelly. Skelly's real name is Sean Kelly. And so he was tall and skinny, and they run his name together and call him Skelly.
Yeah. And all those little things, all those little kind of things will bring you into the town more because you feel like you're in with the people. Because you're hearing it. You're not calling him, Scott. You're not calling this, that, the other thing. So you feel like you're a part of the town and what's going on. But then we've got this pluck the name. Was it Sims Robinette?
Sims Robinette, yeah.
Yeah, I love that one.
Sims Robinette.
So yes, but he has really, and he is a politician and I love the fact that he went out and made a lot of money and no one can figure out how he did. So I really like that fact about him and what was going on.
Yeah, you take a page from real life and, going back to obituaries, when I was looking for a plot for Hello Summer, I knew that it took place in a small southern town, a beach town, and I knew that my investigative reporter needed a juicy story to get her teeth into. And I was reading my hometown newspaper about 3 or 4 years ago, and actually my oldest friend was a reporter there, and he was the obituary writer. But he wrote a story about a local politician and he died a natural death, but he was in his 80s, and at the funeral, his son stood up giving the eulogy and said, well, I know, my mother and my siblings are sad, and we are all sad, but I want to, extend my sympathies to my father's first family. And some of them I think are here. I don't even know their names. And, had spun in that church. And it turned out that this very conservative, very well-respected Christian lawmaker had, at the age of 53, dumped his wife of 30 some years and left his children and grandchildren and married. He had a 25-year-old secretary who worked in his congressional office. He'd gotten her pregnant, and he divorced his wife. And after the baby was born, very quietly married the second wife. And then his first life was erased. Mm-hmm. Wasn't in his congressional biography. People who had known him for decades had no idea that he had this other family. And so that story eventually made headlines around the country. Right. And at that point, I thought, okay, yeah, this is the inspiration for Conley, what Conley can kick up some dust with.
Yeah, she could definitely have fun with this. And they provide so much material, including the funeral, that's definitely great drama. I mean, really, really great drama. And the backstabbing going on and what's the truth and what's not. And she's digging to find out the story. And it just made it so much fun because you could tell these people were real characters. And how are you going to sit there and say who they are and what's going on here? It's tons of fun. From the start, did you know where the book was going, or did you figure it out along the way?
sometimes the book takes me, and sometimes I take the book, and it takes different turns. I knew how I wanted it to end up. I knew that um, my politician was dead. Conley and her friend, the boy next door, are coming back from a night at a juke joint at 3 a.m. They come across a burning one-car accident, and they see there's a unconscious man inside, and they, call the ambulance, and it's too late. The car explodes, the man dies. I could not figure out for the longest time how he died
Mm.
and what it would mean. Um, and then I was writing a scene where I was actually writing the scene where Conley and her friend, right before they find the wreck, and she'd said something offhand, and I went back to that, and I said, okay, I think that maybe I could do something with that.
Yeah,
Of
I
course,
think
then I had to go research it. I had to go. I do a lot of in-person research, and I needed a coroner, and I have friends who help me with this kind of stuff, lawyer friends. And so I have a friend who is a judge in a county north of here. And I emailed him and I said, I'm looking for a coroner. And he said, I can hook you up with a coroner. So I went out there and interviewed her and her staff. And they were great. They were so helpful, tons of information. They even wanted me to witness an autopsy, which I gratefully declined.
yeah.
Like, no, I've got this. I understand.
I
Just
think I get it now.
some things don't need to be. There is such a thing as TMI.
Yeah. There's also fiction, as you always say. There's also fiction. I can make that part up. I don't need to see it. It's okay.
Yeah, it doesn't need. I always tell myself it doesn't need to be possible. It just needs to be plausible.
Good line. Very, very good line. So when you get in the weeds as you're writing, besides jumping in the shower, taking a walk, follows and finisher, how do you get yourself out of the weeds? How do you figure out what's going on?
Lots of times I will sit. I have. I've got one right here. I've got my notebooks, and this is. I used to always plot on yellow legal pads. I've switched over these a couple years ago, and so I write longhand, and I ask myself questions. What if? How could that happen? And I'll write in circles and wake up in the middle of the night. So lots of times, and I'll go back to the sources that I've talked to for research. For instance, when I had an idea of what could have happened to cause the death in the book, I had to go back to the coroner, ask more questions, have a cop friend. He was a longtime homicide. He was the head of the Atlanta Police Homicide Squad for many years. I'll email him or call him up. And a lot of stuff ends up on the cutting room floor because it just doesn't work with the story. So there are times when really all you're doing is grinding it out, and you grind, and hopefully at some point the grinding looks like gliding instead of grinding.
I remember when, I think it was for the Weekenders, you said you were stuck on something and you went to a lighthouse and you were climbing up the steps and you got it. It's like you're standing on the steps and you saw a view and you said, I now know what to do. I can run down and just keep writing. And I thought that was
High Tide Club, actually.
High Tide. Okay.
Yeah, and that was one of those weird things where the story turned in an instant. And things like that happened in Hello Summer, not quite as quickly. It was like different characters contributed a different piece of the puzzle. I didn't have any great unfortunately, aha moments with this book. It was just sort of grinding and reading back over the scenes I had written. And sometimes what happens for me is I unconsciously lay clues that I don't even know are clues.
Yeah, and then you go back and say, wait, I can use that. Well, I always say it's boots on the ground, and for you, it's sandals on the sand. Yeah. That's what you've got to do, is it's sandals on the sand to see your way through.
Yeah, there's just no substitute for it.
Does your journalism training and background inform how you do research and write? Like, do you take better notes because of what your background was?
I think I have a better idea of what exactly I need to know, when I need to go out and really find how things actually work. my journalism background helps in so many ways. It helps with story structure
Mhm.
because, in a newspaper story, it's 3-act structure, beginning, middle, end. Grab them by the throat with a great lead and, you know, drag them through the body of the story. And at the end, you need a slam bang conclusion. So that helps me. Writing on deadline, the idea that no matter what, I have to do it. And if that means grinding and slamming your head and waking up in the middle of the night, so be it. Interviewing people and really listening to the way they speak has helped, I think, help me write believable dialogue. Um, and watching people, when you talk to them, when you ask them questions, they have tells, and you can, if you've done it for a while, you look at somebody and they're shifting and their eyes won't meet yours. Well, that's a tell, they're lying.
Mhm.
Um, and then just I think having the ability to call people out of the blue and ask them questions. The good thing is I've always known that most people are flattered to be asked about
Yeah.
whatever it is that they do, whatever their area of expertise is. Most people like telling you about it and talking shop, and that's golden.
And knowing what to pull out when they're talking shop is part of the game. It's definitely part of, like, how you make it work. When we're talking a lot about, because it is what people say, you've got a great line where Conley is talking about what ambition is. And she says, ambition is not a crime. And I won't having you make me feel guilty about it. Because I think a lot of times that is what's coming up. To which Skelly retorts, neither is loyalty. And it felt there that there was a conversation with each of them, what was being said and was not being said there. And it was just these little nuggets of, like, dialogue that go in that I just feel you do such a good job of trying to set who they are and set what their goals are going to be.
Yeah, neither of them, Conley and Skelly, are having a difficult conversation slash argument, and neither of them is wrong. Each of them has a point of view that isn't wrong, and so trying, trying to be fair to my characters is important to me. When I first started writing in fiction, and had so many dogs of men who were just dogs, who cheated and lied and did horrible things. And someone said to me one time, "You hate men, right?" And I'm like, "No, I don't hate men. Some of my best friends are men. I married my best friend." But the problem is there's just so much good material out there. I don't even have to look for it.
I don't have to go too deeply. But what's really interesting is her grandmother talks to her about meeting in the middle, which she sees as compromising herself. And what I felt was you did a good job of explaining how different generations look at things differently. Am I, capitulating here, or am I just, doing this? When you do you police yourself about making sure your characters are right for their ages? Like what Conley would do compared to her grandmother are very different things.
I don't know that I police myself. I try to be true to my character. And Conley is much younger. She's in her 30s. She's the age of my daughter. It helps. It helps that I have children and their friends and family members who are the age of the characters I'm writing about. It helps me to get into their heads and see the way they see the world.
Yeah. Well, and now let's go to cooking, because we always love cooking in these books as well. Now, at one point, Skelly is cooking a full Kelly burger that has pimento cheese on it. Now, I really wonder what I have been missing all these years of not putting pimento cheese on a burger.
You must
So
try it.
we will be trying that soon, because just so you know, your cookbook from a couple of years ago, is a mainstay at our house. And I know that you cook on social media, but my husband's birthday was a couple of weeks ago, and I was super busy, and he wanted to do a slow roast prime rib. So I told him he was really good at that, so he made that. So he comes up later on, he goes, "I think I'd really like scalloped potatoes." And I said, "Well, I'm still really busy." He goes, "Where's the recipe?" I said, "It's in the NKA, cookbook." So he went down, he made his own scalloped potatoes. So luckily I made the man, like, dessert and salad or something like that, because, but every time he goes to make something, he's like, the pimento cheese. And a couple of Sundays ago, he came in, he goes, "You've really dropped the things today." And I was like, "What's that?" He goes, "It's Master Sunday." I said, "But they're not playing." He goes, "But no, we should still be having the pimento cheese sandwiches. So just know you come up in our home a lot, and
Uh,
we think of you a lot as we cook."
I love that. Yeah, I think that's, cooking for me is a way of showing love and or pissed offedness. If I'm pissed off, I might get in the kitchen and rattle those pots and pans. As my father, there was a song of something like, get out in that kitchen and rattle those pots and pans. I think it was maybe a Chuck Berry song. So yeah, sometimes it's frustration, sometimes it's creativity, and sometimes it's just um, relaxing.
Yeah. The other night we were making these chicken enchiladas, and I have a habit of not reading the entire recipe through. So my husband says, how long does it take to make? And I'm like 20 minutes. And he goes, no, that's the green chili sauce. The other part has about 8 steps. So we were eating at like 8 o'clock at night, which is his least favorite thing. But it's because I never read the whole thing. I'm like, oh, now it has to go in the oven for 30 minutes.
I do that too. It's like, oh, I was supposed to have marinated this overnight.
Right. Right. 4 hours is overnight, isn't it? Like, I don't sleep that much. So I think that's overnight. I think it's really good. So what are you cooking now in the middle of a pandemic? What are you making?
God, I've been teaching myself how to bake bread with yeast. I've always had, a fear of yeast for some reason. So, and yeast was not easy to find, but I finally, after 3 or 4 tries, I finally uh, turned out a plausible loaf of sourdough no knead bread, and that was greatly appreciated. I tried making um, uh, French bread. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that was not. It was more like a giant breadstick. But what else? Oh, we made pasta the other night. My daughter bought a pasta roller, so we made pasta.
And
Uh,
isn't it so fresh and good? Like, it's so much better than packaged.
delicious. I've been doing a lot of Italian, a lot of Mexican, carb heavy. I called March Starch Madness, and Starch Madness has carried over into April, and it's looking like it's going to get into May too.
Yeah. I do say that it's nice that you are able to cook. In our town, when the pandemic first started, the food store was empty of food and we couldn't figure out why. And then my husband rationalized that a lot of people don't cook. So now they usually go to restaurants, and they weren't going to restaurants, so they had to cook. And my next door neighbor came to me at one point and she said, I went to get poultry. And in the poultry case, all that was left was a couple of packages of chicken thighs, one duck breast, and one turkey breast. And I'm convinced that somebody said, I had duck once in a restaurant. I can make that. And you're just like, what an odd thing to have gone and shopped for. And I'm going to get out a cookbook and learn how to do. So we think that a lot of people are cooking for the very first time, and it's going to be a really interesting thing to watch.
Yeah.
So we've been seeing that a lot. You have a mystery built into this book, like really big mystery. And you've been doing that in the last couple of books in a much bigger way. And that's where your career started out, was writing mysteries. What's drawing you back to be doing that again?
When I was writing The Weekenders, my editor, Jennifer Enderlin, who is amazing, she said to me, we always get together, usually when I go to New York, we'll go have a lunch with a lot of rosé with my agent, Stuart Kraszewski, and we'll be, tossing around ideas for a book. And so that year, Jen said, I want you to write a book called The Weekenders. I don't care where it's set, but it should be called The Weekenders. And she said in a very offhand way, and if you want to kill somebody again, that's fine. But since I had permission, there'd always been an element of mystery and an unanswered question in all the novels. But with The Weekenders, I think I sort of gave myself permission. There's a missing husband at the beginning of that book, and that's not a spoiler at all.
Mm-mm.
And I had so much fun with that. And when it came out, it was very successful. I think The Weekenders hit the New York Times bestseller list at number 3. And so I said, okay, that's working. And when I first, segued from writing straight mysteries to writing more beach book kind of thing, I was plotting a book, and I thought, well, if nobody gets killed, what the hell happens?
Yeah.
Where's the conflict? Where's, what happens? What, they just kiss and fall in love and that's it? I mean, it's not enough for my characters to go shopping. Shopping is good, but my characters have bigger things going on in their lives, and that helps me.
Do you know, I still remember Stuart sending me the manuscript of Savannah Blues, which I think was the first book that you wrote as Mary Kay Andrews.
What?
All those years ago. And I just said, this is really good and this should be a series. And he says, she's just finished writing a series. She's not going to write a series again. And it was so funny. I said, but this would be just perfect. And he says, yes, but that's not what she wants to do. But it had such great house porn in it. And I was fluffing the house just after reading that book. It's very inspiring to do things around the house, you know, very inspiring.
I didn't intend for it to be a series. And then I went on to write 3 sequels to it. So there you have it. I never, you know, people always say, you're going to do this, going to do that. You're going to go back and do those characters. And I'm like, I don't know.
I don't know.
Honestly, I'm just not that organized. It's just whatever works with, you know, with the High Tide Club, which came out 2 years ago. I'd written a book called Save the Date. And at the end of that book, I had a runaway bride. And that bride ended up on a barrier island off the coast of Georgia, literally hiding in a tree. And I was on book tour for Save the Date. And somebody asked, you know, whatever happened to your runaway bride? You left her up a tree. And I said, you know, I don't know, but maybe I'll find out. And so I never had any intention of doing anything with that runaway bride. But she came back to be the protagonist of the High Tide Club. And she came back to have much more substance than I thought she'd had.
Yeah. A very well rounded out character for the woman who just, you know, fled into the tree, like, you know, ran into the tree. I was talking to Don Winslow a couple of weeks ago, and he said he's got so many characters from the past, and he says, will they come back? And he goes, I'm never going to say never, because you just know where it's going to end up working again.
Right. I have finally learned to say that. You know, I don't know. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll make a cameo in a future book.
Yeah.
But there are some characters who seem to have more potential for that. For instance, Conley in Hello Summer. I think people have said, you know, the book hasn't actually come out yet, but people who've read it early have said, you know, I'd like to see more of her. And the same thing with the protagonist of Sunset Beach, last year's book, who is basically is an investigator for her father, who's a big time ambulance chasing lawyer, personal lawyer.
So yeah, both of them, they both have enough, and they're young enough that you could bring them back in a couple of different ways. You could bring them out a couple of different things. I remember years ago, I think it was Michelle Campbell said, but if you bring children into the equation, you can't just leave them behind. So when they're single or newly married, it's one thing, but you can't just dump somebody who has a child. Like all of a sudden you have to go home and see to the child.
Yeah, and that's why when I first started writing, I didn't give my characters kids at all. It's like, what am I going to do with the kid when she has to go out in the middle of the night and go, you know, chasing around? What am I going to do with the kid? And then with, I think with The Weekenders, she needed a kid, and so I had to give her this very troublesome teenage girl.
And that's always fun to write. That's always a fun character to write.
Yeah, especially if you've raised a troublesome teenager. And I don't know anybody who's raised a teenager that didn't get some trouble.
Yeah, yeah. And it's always like, wait a second, why did you do that? Why did you do that? Like, that's material. That's all material. It's all material working up to the end.
Yeah, and you know, it's good to give yourself permission for your characters to make hideous mistakes.
And in decorating or otherwise.
Right. In The Weekenders, she does make a really hideous, more than one hideous mistake. Same thing with, I wrote a book called Little Bitty Lies. And the protagonist of that book tells her teenage daughter that her father is dead. She does that. She lies to her kid. And that was the premise of the book from the very beginning. And then I had to figure out, how do I make her likable? How do I get I don't like her that much for doing that. But she has some reasons for what she does.
And you just let the characters evolve and explain what those reasons are. And then you can sit there and say, we have to be on their side. You always move us towards being sympathetic towards the characters.
Yeah, I really cannot read or write one of those unreliable narrator books. I mean, I know The Woman in the Window and the Girl on the Train, all those twisty suspense novels rely on an unreliable and unrelatable lots of times character. I just it's hard for me. I spend a year on a book, and it's hard for me to spend a year with a character that is beyond redemption. I believe in redemption.
Yeah, and I think that right now people are looking for light and fun. They're looking
I hope so.
I really think it's like escape, please. Take me to the beach. Even if I'm not going right now, let me remember how much fun that was.
I'm going to the beach and I have a beach house.
Yeah. You can't go. Yeah. Are they not letting you go down there as well? Like, because I know on the Outer Banks, you can't get on the Outer Banks right now. Even if you have a second home, you can't get there.
You actually can go, but we have not felt good about going there because Tybee Island, where we have our beach house, is quite small. It's 15 minutes from the mainland. There's no doctor on the island. There are no hospitals. So if somebody gets sick, it's a two-lane bridge, and we haven't felt that it was really fair to go. Now, with things opening back up, will we go? I just don't know. But we're staying home.
Yeah. I actually like staying home. I hate to say it, but like I'm a homebody. I
I
like cooking.
I know book tour.
Yeah,
I'm
your book tour. We're gonna get into that in a second. We're gonna get a second. I'm not going on a book tour. You also capture the magic of sunsets at night, and I think that they mean a lot to you. I follow a lot on social media, and you do beautiful sunset pictures, and it's always the most spectacular one is always the night you're leaving.
Yeah.
It's like or the fabulous sunrise. When you sit and you're writing, are you thinking about the landscape or the beauty of that kind of a sunset? Because I think you do such a good job of capturing place as ambiance as well.
Yeah, I mean, sunsets are very symbolic.
Mhm.
Last year's book was called Sunset Beach, which just came out in paperback today, BYI.
Mhm. Yep.
BYI. By the way, BTW, BTW. I love sunsets, but that's my thing when I go to the beach. If I go away, run away to write, I want to stop what I'm doing right before sunset, walk down to the beach with a glass of chilled, cheap Chardonnay or rosé, and I want to watch the sun sink into the water. That's probably a throwback to my days growing up on the Gulf of Mexico in St. Pete. We have better sunrises where we at our house on Tybee. So um, lots of times our house faces the ocean. I mean,
Mm,
our bedroom faces the ocean.
right.
Can't really see it from our bedroom window. I can see the light coming. And so I'll jump out and run down over the beach boardwalk in my PJs and house shoes to snap a picture of sunrise.
Yeah. That's spectacular because it's like you're saying goodbye to the day. I remember I used to stand on this one bridge on the Outer Banks and you just watch the sun go down and you can miss it in a flash. Like if you go home to get the camera, it's not going to happen. Sometimes you just have to stay in the moment and enjoy the moment. And I
Yeah,
think that's what a sunset and a sunrise does is you have to be in the moment.
yeah. I know you know that restaurant Jamie always takes me to at Duck, and
Yeah.
we always sit and have a drink and watch the sunset. Yeah.
It's just beautiful. Absolutely beautiful setting. So you typically tour for 4 to 6 weeks. You typically are a city a day kind of a person up and down the coast.
Right.
What does it feel like to be locked down as the book is coming out? I think this is the first time you haven't toured in all the time I've known you.
Yeah, this is my 27th novel, my 28th book. It'll be the first time in 29 years that I haven't done book tour, physical book tour. Sad. I miss the human connection. I miss hugging booksellers who've, become my ally and my, champions for my career. I'm gonna miss, you go to the bookstores where they welcome you, where you have a following, and you see the same people, the same readers come back, and they show you, oh, here's my picture from 7 years ago with my daughter, and now she's in high school, and we're reading the books together. I miss that. I miss that connection. That's, I always say, people say, what's your favorite part of writing? And I say, book tour.
Mm-hmm.
Writing is lima beans,
Mm-hmm.
but book tour is chocolate mousse. Book tour
Yeah.
is the reward for eating the lima beans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know I've been to a number of your events at the Jersey Shore, and I know when you go down to the Outer Banks, you go down to Jamie's store
Yeah.
and Downtown Books, and it's just so much fun to see like what the reactions are, like people coming up to you and what they remember. And I always hang back and just watch them interacting with you, and it's just this very magical moment of them relating to the book, but also sharing. And I think that that's the one thing that comes out of this. It's not a one-way street with the readers at all. It's such a shared experience that you're missing this time out.
Yeah, I mean, they tell me great stories, and I've used some of their stories over the years. Um, they tell me stuff they would never tell another stranger. They tell me what my books have meant to them, and that means a lot to me to know that your story touches somebody and has been meaningful for them. Um, you can't really, I mean, I'm thankful to have a way to do a virtual book tour,
Hmm.
that I'm going to miss the physical contact. I'm going to miss going to dinner with booksellers, going out to drinks with booksellers. I'm going to miss seeing um, certain fans that come year after year. I got an email from a fan in Raleigh today, and he said, I'm just going to miss you so much. He always gets like half a dozen books for all of his friends. And so I said, well, yeah, I'll send you some signed book plates. I'm going to miss you too.
Yeah, yeah, because it becomes relationships with these people as you travel through the years. And there's cities or there are towns and cities that you look forward to going back to
Yeah.
because it's so much a part of what you've done. I mean, when you come down on the Jersey Shore, there's this author who lives in Georgia who has written about the South, and she comes up and people are showing up, hundreds of people are showing up to come out and see you. And it's been so much fun for me watching your career grow and expand into other different places around the country. It's been a real joy.
Yeah, I always hope that, I people think of me as a Southern writer. Okay, I am. I've never lived outside the South. I always hope my stories are universal stories.
Mhm.
My stories, maybe they're physically set in Florida, Georgia, or North Carolina, but they could be set anywhere. They could be set on a lake in Michigan. They could be set, in the Pacific Northwest. They could be set in the middle of nowhere because they're stories about people, about, you know, betrayal and loss and forgiveness and redemption. And those things are universal themes, I hope.
And you know what also, you write about the towns that we often drive through. And because these are not the big beach towns, these are not the big resort towns that, so many people are gravitating towards all the time. And that's what I really love because as we were driving down the Outer Banks, there was always these streets that we passed going through Virginia and going through Maryland or whatever. And I sit there and I say, that's somebody's home. It's right here on this road. And I've passed it for 20 years now. Who are those people? Like, what's going on inside that house? And I feel that that's where you take us. You take us to all those offbeat places.
I love a detour, even the ones that aren't clean, even the ones my GPS tells me not to take. I'll go,
Yeah.
oh, there's a road called Salvation. I think I'll just turn here and see what's down at Salvation.
You know, the other night, my room, I always sleep with everything pitch dark and it was very bright and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I looked over at my phone, Waze was lit up. And I was looking like, oh my gosh, I haven't used Waze in like 6 or 7 weeks. Like Waze, it's like, wow, remember Waze? Remember? And it was my daily, like, 2 times a day going to the city. That was all I had to worry about. Now I have other things to worry about.
I think I filled up my gas tank a month ago, and I've still got like a quarter of a tank. And my big outing for the week is to go to the store during geyser hour.
Yeah, go food shopping. My husband's been hunting and gathering, not me. I miss the food store. And I was like, that's kind of pathetic, but that's exactly what I'm missing. So are you going to do a lot of virtual events? Are you going to be doing some things virtually?
Yeah, it'll be almost all virtual, I think. Yeah, we're doing Zooms, um, all kinds of things, and we're trying. Really, what we're trying to do is connect with indie bookstores because they are really hurting. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I have a book contract and it's in writing that I'm going to make a living, but bookstores, indie bookstores, and they've been so wonderful to me. I mean, they've made the career that I've had. And um, so we're doing virtual events with indie bookstores. So the big launch that we usually have um, will be a brunch.
Mm-hmm. Well, that'll be
Virtual
fun.
brunch. Yeah, bring your own book and bagel, I guess.
You're your own book and bagel on what you're going to do. There's what you're going to do. And what I also feel that besides, having being able to, go to all these virtual events and enjoy them, what people have been saying though is they're getting to go to more than they usually get to go to because they couldn't make an event at 7 o'clock. Like I know last year I missed your event, so you missed hearing about the book. So a lot of people are saying that they can watch you more than once because they can see you at different locations. So I have been hearing that feedback, which was interesting.
Yeah, I hope so. We're trying to make the best of a not very happy situation.
Hmm.
Um, I hope that will be the case.
We'll try that. So have you? what's next for you besides your virtual touring? Have you started Book Next, or like, Carol, let me enjoy this, please?
I have. It takes place. It's set in Florida again, in a small Gulf Coast town, and a young woman shows up out of nowhere. Pulls into the it's a mom and pop motel, and she pulls into the motel parking lot shortly before sunup, and she's got a 4-year-old child in the car with her, little girl named Maya, and she is a stranger in a strange land, and she's come through some bad stuff, and she's not quite sure why. She's fled New York with this little girl, and she's come to this motel. She finds a magazine clipping about the motel, and she goes there, and she doesn't quite know why she's there, and I don't quite know why she's there either.
But you can go bake some bread, and while you're kneading, you can figure out. So your new thing will be kneading. You know.
I don't know if there's going to be a whole lot of bread baking in this little tiny crappy motel room. She'll fix it. That's not even in question.
Yeah, that's not even a question. That's not even going to come up. That's not even going to come up. So, well, it's always great to talk to you. I wish we were seeing you in person. Next time you're in New York, we will make a date. We will make a date and do that. I wish you so much success, and everybody, it's hello summer. And are we just ready for it? And if we're just ready for a beach book we can escape with, and you've created it for us. So thank you so very, very much.
Thanks, Carol. Great to be with you again.
Yeah, look forward to it next time. And to our readers, look forward to seeing you next time as well. Thanks for joining us.